Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longrie. Thank you for tuning in. Off the Record News is brought to you live from the SCC studios out of White Bear Lake. And through a cooperative agreement, this program is also simultaneously broadcast to those studios out of the Roseville viewing area, the CTV studios. As a result of this cooperative effort, this program reaches out to and serves, approximately 28 communities in the Northeast metropolitan area. Now, today is June 3rd, our live broadcast date, so if you have questions or comments for either myself or my guests, I invite you to call in and participate in the program with us. Now, if you watch this program on a different date and time in some of our other channel time slots, either in Stillwater, St. Paul, or Inver Grove Heights, well, unfortunately, you won't be able to call in to the live broadcast because, well, we're the recording version. But you can always get a hold of my guests. We will have their website up later on in the program, or if perhaps you need to contact me because you have some show ideas, you can get a hold of me on Facebook 24/7. Now this evening we are going to talk about an organization that's been around for about 10 years, and you probably never have heard of them. And yet they're doing a lot in our communities to bring about citizen engagement, to help folks understand how they can be an important part of making decisions in their community, and how they can become leaders when maybe they thought really they couldn't become a leader, but they really can. And that it can be up to them to make a change in their community. And so with that introduction, I want to introduce the organization that's coming on this evening, Nexus. And I have with me the program director, Terri
Thao.
Terri Thao. And also she has brought with her a couple of the people who have gone through their leadership program who can specifically talk about the importance of the Leadership Institute and the program to them, and the impact it had on them to be able to be engaged in their communities. So with that, I want to turn it over to Terri and welcome Terri to the program. Welcome to coming on the program.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you for having us on the program.
Yes.
So we're honored to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about the Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute, which is the program I run at Nexus. So we actually have a more formal PowerPoint slide here that we're going to run through, but throughout the evening we're going to interject and throughout the show we're going to interject and have our two alums of the program, Marsha, Cressy, and Suyapa, Miranda, talk about their experience, so that it's not just me talking the whole time, but that we get some good interaction too.
Well, that's good, because our viewers here on our program, they're familiar with having everybody at the table chiming in and talking. Now, I do want to mention, though, for some of our viewers out there, is that I didn't really know who some of the alumni might be that would be coming on the program. And Marsha here has been actually on my program before in the past.
Yes.
And you just never know exactly how things work out in life, how you run into many people time and time again, because your circles just are so intertwined. And I think that is, in many ways, what is so interesting and fascinating about community engagement and having citizens being involved in the grassroots, because once they get involved in one little organization, one facet, then they expand out and are involved in more, and then pretty soon, well, it becomes sort of a powerful force of citizens, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think and ultimately that's what a democracy is. We're fortunate to be, living here in the United States where we get that opportunity. I will also say, too, is that I knew Marsha from a lot of other great work that she's done, too, even before she joined the program. So as you have many different intersections with her, so have I. So it was great that she was in the program, and she'll talk a little bit more about that. But we would go to, precinct caucuses together, and I'd see her, and so it's just nice to actually get to know people more on a deeper level, which is what we definitely do in the program.
Yeah, and before we get started talking about the organization and the leadership program, I'm going to have the two alumni introduce themselves to our viewers and say a little bit about themselves, so that way our viewers say, aha, they sound like regular people just like me. Marsha, since we've been talking about you so much already, we'll throw it over to you, and you get to start first.
Okay. Well, that I've been doing a work over the many years in my community to work to end poverty, to work to end homelessness, and I'm one of the co-founders of Minnesotans Standing Together to End Poverty. MinStep, people probably know it as. And for me, looking at the Boards Commission Leadership Institute, it was so important that, because there's so many things out there that may or may not be positive for low wealth people, that may or may not be positive for people of color. So it was important for me in my wanting to recommend this program that I participate myself, and I learned so much through it. It was really great. So I wanted to share how much that no matter how engaged you may be, there's so much else out there that you can learn and that you can share with your community.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. And I would imagine your story is much the same.
Sure, no, absolutely. So my name is Suyapa Miranda, and I also was in this last alumni. It was an excellent program. I mean, I think it really put on that equity lens, which is very unique, and most programmings don't have that very specific, detail-oriented of like, this is equity, this is how our commissions, this is how everything affects everything, kind of seeing how the flow of our city kind of works. I think that was a really great overview. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And there's outreach programs that Nexus has done where citizens can find out more about the organization and what they do, because you have a lecture series, and that's how I found out about you, because I went to this lecture series that I came across my social media, and what I found fascinating about it was it talked specifically about budgets and equity, and about when you're looking at your budgeting process at the city council level or at the county board level or whatever level you're talking about, but particularly at the local level, that when you're looking at your budgeting, thinking about what kind of impact that some decisions might make on that issue of equity within your community. Now, of course, in order to be asking yourself those questions, you have to understand what are the equity issues in your community, which is sort of fundamental. But I think that there's many elected officials that, while maybe on the surface they have a feeling about that there's some kind of inequity going on, that they don't specifically have the statistics for it so that they can really understand this is the inequities that we have, whatever that might be. And now that I know that, how can I have that in the back of my mind when I'm making budgeting decisions? And a little later on, I have an example that I think that might fit well into some of this discussion of how understanding how there are certain inequities within your community, and if you make a decision, that it will have a great impact on making those inequities even greater when you think you were doing something really good, and you really weren't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, that's our Thursday night issue series. It's in the presentation later, but what was really compelling about that issue series was we had a speaker up there who talked about how in the last, a couple years ago, they were able to actually stop prevent a fare increase for Metro Transit. And we often know a lot of times people who ride public transit don't often have other sources of transportation to take. And so a fare increase would have already devastated the little amount of disposable income that people already have.
Yeah.
So it definitely is an equitable decision. And when we talk about these folks, it's communities of color, low folks. It's a lot of our seniors are living at poverty level.
Absolutely.
And so, and definitely all of our youth. And so it's who a fare increase, and they started making youth pay full fares, right, Marsha? And so it's really it's pretty devastating.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, well, now
But it was a win.
Yeah, go
I mean,
ahead.
it was
It was
a
a win
win
for-
wasn't, you know,
It was an
'cause we were-
equity win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an equity win.
Right, exactly. But again, it goes to that awareness of first you've got to understand
Yeah.
what your inequities are
Yep.
in your community or the realm of what you're talking about. And then from that, then use that when you're making your decisions to say, okay, now we're really balancing factors here. Now we're not just looking at one set of factors. Now tell us a little bit more about Nexus and how it got organized. And, you know, obviously here the organization in the Metro has been around for 10 years. But there's a little more to the story than that, isn't there?
There is. And so I'm actually going to go to a quick slide that back and forth in my presentation here. About Nexus. So we are a community building intermediary. We've been around since 2003, and what that means is we get funding from other foundations and pass through in a couple of strategic program areas. And on the screen there notes we do work in community engagement and community wealth building. And engagement includes organizing, deep engagement within communities. Community wealth building is that we supported programs that helped organizations that helped people buy homes, open businesses, do financial literacy, because people have different values around money. And so for the past 11 years we've been around, we've re-granted, as an intermediary, we have re-granted over about $11 million. And we started our work originally in just 2 neighborhoods, but on the east side of St. Paul and on in South Minneapolis along Lake Street, but have expanded that work to working actually in North Minneapolis. We were involved in some of the work with the Northside Achievement Zone, which is the replication of the Harlem Children's Zone model in the Twin Cities here in Minneapolis. And then we also are now involved in a lot of regional work, actually interesting enough around transit development, because we all know particularly the Metropolitan Council has decided that that's going to be a really big tool for economic development. And we've already seen some of the impact of that along the Green Line in St. Paul.
Right, and I think that when we're talking about that too, it's more than just housing. Because if you're just talking about housing, that's not creating long-term sustainable employment. I mean, that's creating a place for people to live, but then the people who are living there, they still need to work someplace, and it needs to be more than just minimum wage jobs.
Yes, and so we see a lot of our work is very much holistic, looking at all those pieces, right? And so we also know you need to have family sustaining or livable wage jobs, and then which helps you stay in the home, which actually helps. They're actually starting to look at the fact that it impacts student achievement rates too as well. And so we look at things on the holistic view. We offer capacity building and technical assistance to organizations. We do a lot of work in community collaboratives. And we really are looking at our work at 3 different levels: at the resident level or individual level, within organizations, because we, as an intermediary, we only fund other 501c3 nonprofits, and at systems levels, because we all know policy levels and institutions are very important actors in the work that we do.
And the system levels, of course, then that includes like local governments,
Absolutely.
right? Whether or not that's city councils or their commissions or their boards. And so that's really grassroots.
Absolutely. And our mission is really to build more engaged and powerful communities. So, and particularly our focus is with communities of color and other underrepresented communities.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that this helps our viewers to understand really sort of what the mission is. I mean, it's not, I mean, it's specific. It's broad, but it's specific. And then that's where then the program, the leadership program, Leadership Institute, I mean, that's something that we're going to be talking more about as well, that fits into that, because what you're doing is developing grassroots leaders, correct?
Absolutely. Yes. And so the program started out actually in about actually in the Bay Area, in Oakland, at this great organization called Urban Habitat. And we all know in the Bay Area, it's been kind of ground zero for gentrification and displacement. Property values there are ridiculous. I think they have some of the highest rents, if not the highest rents, and property values in the whole country. And what they did 20 years ago was they saw the impact that all this future development was going to have, and they started out as doing a lot of advocacy work. But in 2009, they really started to ask themselves a question of, imagine what would be not just to be an advocate and advocating to decision makers and policymakers, but to actually have a seat at the table. And in particular, what they discovered was that this local, municipal, or regional board and commission level, people had a lot of local, could make a lot of local impact.
Yeah, that's correct. And I don't think that often citizens realize the impact that they can have if they step into one of those leadership roles, because they have maybe access to more information. They actually can help to be a conduit for helping other citizens become more engaged and to be heard. Because if everybody is the same on the board and commissions, well, then you have mind sameness, and everybody thinks the same, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things we've learned, I think most people know you want to have a diverse set of opinions and life experiences and lived experiences at the table too, because that only makes, because our communities are the same way. And so that's a lot of what we really want to have in the program. Our goals are really to let people hold priority seats. We want to really make sure people are technically and politically prepared and supported. And at the end of the day, we really want policies and resources changed to reflect and respond to community. The program itself sits on our broader leadership continuum. There's lots of other great leadership development programs here in the Twin Cities, and we actually work in partnership with a lot of them because we know that we need to collectively work on this together. We know sometimes it is, a couple of several leaders of the same leaders who go through some of our programs, but that's great because we know it's not just one experience, but multiple experiences in order to get you to feel confident and aware of what's happening in the systems.
And do you find and I'm going to ask this of the alumni of the program, that when people first start in the program, if they have one concept of what they think they're going to discover and learn versus when they get out of it, what they've discovered and they've learned. Now, that may take us hours to go into all of that.
And they've been very honest and told us to.
But briefly, perhaps both of you could give some perspective on that.
It's been, for me, I learned a lot in terms of how different commissions and different councils and things were able to be accessed. It was really something that we've talked about and that we do talk about is as emerging leaders from our communities, we want them to be able to participate. And it was really something that I was not, that I learned a lot about how you can get access to those councils and those commissions, that I wasn't really, I work a lot at the Capitol, so it's like, how do you get there? You get elected, but as far as and then how do you get there? Because that's another thing that we're really working on, is getting more people elected from our communities, but and to run and to feel powerful to do that. But just the amount of impact that the local boards and local councils and local district councils have, and to engage people and to have people recognize that their voice is very important to have there. I mean, when we, I live in District 2 in the city of St. Paul, so we're doing a lot of work to and hope that there's a lot of people that live in the district that represent the district that will participate in that council, because I think it will be able to make a difference for our neighborhood.
All right. So I guess when I initially came onto the program, I have to be honest, I thought I knew everything. I was like, I'm a person of color, I'm coming onto the program, equity, check. And I think that, and then there was a lot of talk about with the transportation and, a lot of interesting conversations that we had about the city council and how programs and commissions work. And through that, with the equity lens was the most important piece, because that gave me a perspective that I guess I didn't have. And even with the transportation board, advisory board that I'm on right now, I would have never been a part of that had I not gone through the program. Because I would say, well, okay, Green Line, how does a person of color like myself have any influence with the Met Council at this point? Like, what is there really to do? But getting that focus on equity builds a different, it's different for me. I feel like, I'm a part of this. My voice is needed at that table. And I think, if anything, that program created that sense of need and urgency. Hey, you don't like what's going on in your community. We have an ability to change that, but we have to be at the table and getting our voices heard. And I think that was the amazing part of that excellence part. And then when I came out of the program, I thought, wow, I thought I knew something, but I know so much more now. And just the expanding of the networks and getting to know the systems. I guess I really hadn't had a need to know the systems before. And I'd served on Chicano Latino Affairs Council on one of the commissions, and I said, well, I applied for that. But quite honestly, it's like, how do we get hooked up with Met Council? I mean, if you're not signing up specifically on an email list, which I didn't, how do we know when the positions and commissions are open, or when do we apply? And I think that definitely left the door open and created, new road for myself of saying, okay, I'm worth something. I can have a voice and a say at this table.
And many of the things that I'm hearing you both talk about are very common expressions that I've heard many times from people. One, how does the system work? Because if you don't know how the system works, how can you be involved? How can you participate? It's a big mystery. And even from one city to the next, you may have different systems because cities are organized in different ways. They might be a charter city, they might be a Plan B, they might be a Plan A, they might be a hybrid. Who knows? And that's the first place to figure out what's the system. And as you were mentioning too, is that when you think that you're not really part of it, sometimes you think, well, I don't need to know what the system is because it's irrelevant. I can't do anything about it. But the secret can get out, that once you know what the system is, then you actually can participate. And I think you had a great example about how once you started thinking about what the system was, and that there was this urgent need for people to be involved, then it changed things and opened doors.
Absolutely. And I wanted to bring up, right now is a really big time. I have on the screen here a lot of, conditions that are going on right now that really encourage or necessitate us to really start to think about how we start to get more involvement on boards and commissions. We definitely have the demographics with what a lot of the state demographer and some other folks have been saying, the browning and graying of Minnesota. We see a lot of the diversity that's growing here. We already know there's one county in Minnesota that's majority communities of color. We also know in Minnesota, 1 every 5 people by 2030 will be 65 or older. So it's the boomer age that everyone keeps talking about, that's definitely going to be impacting us. And particularly from an economic point of view, one of the things we hear from a lot of people, even business leaders, is that in order for Minnesota and the Twin Cities to stay competitive as a region, we're going to need everybody to participate. Communities of color, people with disabilities, youth. We need everyone to participate in order to to maintain kind of this great quality of life that we already have. We all know unemployment in Minnesota is actually really low. It's 3.7% as of the most recent numbers.
Go ahead, Marsha.
Those unemployment numbers are for white people.
Yeah.
And people talk about, and I love Minnesota, right? But Minnesota is 21st. We rank 21st in the ability for someone to have a home that they can afford to live in. And that in Minnesota, we just got the numbers from a national organization that we're part of, where if you worked 2.1 full-time jobs, you could afford, and had 2 small children, you could afford to have them in public school and afford to have a home. And so I just want to make sure that when we're talking about, you know, the wonders of Minnesota, that what we're talking about is everybody, which is a lot of what the BCLI was really about, was like, you know, what's that lens?
That's right. And again, it goes back to that issue of when you're talking about statistics and demographics and whatever, to know who they specifically are identifying, or is this an average over the whole state, or what it is. Because say, for instance, like if you're comparing Ramsey County with a county in southern Minnesota, and you looked at the, say for instance, the demographics, the Latino demographics, Ramsey County, they don't even have a blip. But there are counties in southern Minnesota that have a very high demographic of Latinos. And see, so that creates different considerations, I think, for those policymakers when they're thinking about, okay, I'm making this decision at the local level to either raise this or do something else. What is this impact going to have on our community, not looking at statistics for the metro or vice versa.
And I gave that in the context to say that we're doing well off now. However, my next slide here talks about the reality for a lot of communities of color. And I think Marsha, and I'm glad she brought that up, actually. And there's a new kind of research coming off every day. But we all know for communities of color, there's every demographic that indicates quality of life. Communities of color are at the bottom of the demographics, most likely to live in poverty, most likely to suffer from a chronic illness, so health outcomes. Again, Marsha talked about less likely to own a home and also graduate from high school when we talk about all the achievement or opportunity gaps, too, that are out there. And what's really interesting about the context and the greater environment that we live in is there's this whole broader issue of income inequality that's been long time raised by a lot of communities. And like, for example, the We Are 99% campaign, and even the Federal Reserve, actually, which is not thought to be by no means any radical organization, is actually talking about income inequality, and they've been conducting economic research looking at this impact. And I think that's fascinating that a Federal Reserve Bank is coming out with this data.
Well, in some ways, actually, to tell you the truth, I'm not too surprised because our country is based upon commerce and consumerism and buying and selling houses and buying and selling cars and having the money move from point A to point B. And if you have a huge segment of your population that doesn't have any discretionary income, you don't have any money going from point A to point B.
Yeah,
and it will stall the economy, is what it will do.
Absolutely. There's a great organization out in California, Policy, that actually talked about that if we actually increase the just what our GDP would be had all African Americans contributed, we would have had a phenomenal gross domestic product, right? And so I think we're in some interesting times right now. I think we have movements like Black Lives Matter that have been raising visibility too about police brutality and kind of structural racism issues. And so this program does come at a really interesting time in I think in kind of broader movements and a lot of what's happening in community. The program itself, the Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute, it's really not your typical board training. We really are a broader social change tool to shape equitable policies at the local government level.
That's great. And you know, right now, let's take don't lose that thought, because we have a caller on the line.
Oh, wonderful.
So let's invite our caller to the table, and then we'll return to talking more about the Leadership Institute. Yes, caller, questions or comments this evening?
Diana Longrie, thanks for having this fascinating discussion about this Leadership Institute. It really sounds like it's going to be a positive change.